Hey guys, it's Casey here. Welcome back to the Casey Podcast. All right, so this is going to be part one of my poetry book series. If you may or may not know, I've just released a poetry book called When the Gods Answer, Liturgies of Love and Destruction. I released it not too long ago, maybe a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it's been out for a little bit, and I wanted to do a podcast talking about it. So this is going to be part one of my poetry book series. When it comes to my book, part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I know there are themes in my book that may be hard for people to understand, and I kind of want to clarify them and make them more digestible, if that makes sense. All right, so my book is a collection of cosmic horror poetry. It deals with themes of religion, cosmic horror, spirituality, nihilism, existentialism, paganism, divine retribution, and divine punishment. Hopefully a few of those themes or words make sense to you, but if not, it's perfectly okay. I'm going to try and make it easier. So like I said, I wanted to make a podcast talking about my book just to show people what inspired it, what inspired the poems, and hopefully help you to understand some of the more harder themes. Because my friend, she kind of gave me an eye-opener saying that it's good, but you need to make it more approachable to people. You need to help them understand it more. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. But yeah, I'm going to do that in this podcast and in the next podcast. My AC just kicked in because I live in Florida and it's hot as fuck. And I also want to show you guys, I'm not just soccer 24/7. I like to talk about other things, like sometimes things with a lot of depth and sometimes like heavy topics. Anyway, that all being said, let's get into it. All right, so the origin story of my book. When and why I started writing it. As I've said on social media, this book was 4 years in the making. However, the idea of making a poetry book around themes of cosmic horror actually came to me more so in 2024. Before, I was just writing poems, some to do with love, eroticism, soccer, and soccer players. And yes, I did include that in my poetry collection, but I guess it can be looked at through the lens of love and romance, looked at through the lens of cosmic horror and maybe nihilism and existentialism. I haven't really thought so much about that part. But yeah, on top of that, on top of writing this poetry book and also doing my YouTube channel, King of Cups and Swords, and covering soccer, I was also struggling with my own deep-seated anger, resentment, and rage that I've held back ever since I was in high school, probably even further than that. So that's kind of one of the themes that comes up a lot, anger, rage, and resentment. And it was also just me struggling to process and come to terms with what I was feeling and what I was going through. Because the thing is, I didn't know how to channel that deep anger and resentment. I wasn't taught emotional regulation. I was just taught anger and sadness were bad, and it was like I wasn't allowed to feel those emotions, and I didn't know how to express that. So while trying to heal and understand like what I was feeling and why it wasn't a bad thing that I was angry or upset, I just wrote poetry. It's interesting because a friend of mine who practices witchcraft told me some of the poems feel and sound like ritual invocations, hexes, curses, and spells. Well, being spiritual myself, I started leaning into that more when it comes to my poetry. I think what comes to mind is like poetry, but fire and brimstone. If you remember those liturgies, like from old Catholic priests from medieval times or a long time ago, it was very like fire and brimstone-y. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, like I said, around the time of all this, I was still covering women's soccer, but I was also diving deeper into things like spirituality, paganism, religion, the occult, as well as nihilism and existentialism. And with nihilism and existentialism came cosmic horror. I'm not exactly sure where it started, like cosmic horror, but yeah, it kind of all just culminated there. So when it came to cosmic horror as a genre, I really struggled to write cosmic horror fiction. And I wanted to, but I was just struggling with the themes. I didn't know how to capture what existential dread felt like. Now living in 2025 in America, I unfortunately understand what existential dread feels like now. I just didn't think I would be learning this way. Yeah, I also didn't know how to write and truly capture the despair by a big and oftentimes tragic realization, because that's also a theme in cosmic horror, and I kind of had trouble capturing those emotions. Poetry, though, was the one way I was able to approach cosmic horror and make those feelings more seen and identifiable to me and digestible for me. Eventually, I was able to bring it all together in this book. All right, so now we're on the topic of the writing journey, what the actual process was like. When it came to the writing process, it was very sporadic, sometimes very random. Inspiration came to me from different places, different events, and what was going on around me. The thing is, I approach poetry very differently from writing stories or fiction. Stories and fiction, I just sit down to write. It's pretty simple, as long as I don't procrastinate. But when it comes to poetry, it's a bit harder for me to explain. I can't just sit down and write poetry. I can't do it unless I feel something, whether it be love, anger, sadness, pain, etc. It's part of the reason why I love poetry. Like, writing love poetry is hard for me now because I don't feel it. I don't feel love, or I don't feel it towards anyone. If I'm not in love with someone, I can't feel it enough to write about it. The poem in this book, I Will Not Love You, kind of sums that up, like how I view love and romance. Like, even the love poems in this book, I'll admit I wasn't fully in. There's almost like an air of detachment, which seems more appropriate to something like nihilism, cosmic horror, existentialism. But then again, there is this poem called I Suppose Men Can Be Attractive. I guess that's where I did go all in. But I think when it came to that poem, I was trying to harness Sappho, the lesbian poet, and also Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. Yeah, I was trying to like combine both of those. As for going on a little further, when it came to editing, God, it was a pain in the ass. I forgot why I haven't published anything for so long. Like, I hated formatting especially. I forgot how hard it was to format books. You have gutter, edges, line breaks, page size, actual page size versus what is needed for a book. If it says like a certain page size, you actually had to go like 1.25 up. I think someone might understand that or not. But yeah, the editing, formatting, all of that, it sucked. I suppose if you've been doing it for a long time, it's easy. But I haven't published a book in years, so it was actually really hard. When it came to editing, oh, I hated this part. I did so many read-throughs to get rid of all the typos, and even though everything is okay now, I can't look at my book without thinking something was wrong, that I spelled something wrong, and the grammar is wrong. One time, I woke up at 2 a.m. once to check the dedication page. Yes, the dedication page, because I thought I spelled Jennifer Marojan's name wrong. And Jennifer Marojan, she's a women's soccer player. And if you know who that is, she's German, but she's also from Hungary. And how Jennifer is spelled in Magyar or Hungarian is very different to how it's spelled in English. And we also call her Maro in women's soccer. But yeah, I've checked her name so many times in my book, and I'm still convinced I spelled it wrong. And it also gets funny because as I was writing, or not writing, while I was in the editing process with all the read-throughs and stuff, an author told me during that process, "You're going to hate your book." Oh yeah, I definitely felt that. I dreaded the read-throughs. Like, it's just poetry. I can't imagine, like, if I wrote a novel. I mean, I did write a novel in the past, but I would probably hate my novel if I had to, like, read through it, because a novel before it's printed in book form, like in a paperback book form, it's usually like 200 plus pages. But then when you put it in like book form, it could be like 300, 400, maybe over 400 pages. But yeah, my poetry book is shorter, but I would probably not be happy about having to do so many read-throughs and editing for like a novel. But when it was all over, when I published my book, I can't remember if I even celebrated it. Maybe I had a glass of wine, but I think I had a match to cover, because around the time I published it, the Women's Euro was going on. So I didn't exactly get the time to celebrate it, because I was also covering women's soccer, and I was very focused on that. Now the Euro is over, so I can focus on my book and the NWSL, which is also women's soccer. All right, so now we're on to themes and inspirations. What inspired my poems? This is gonna be a while. Yeah, so there were a lot of things. Love, soccer players, world events, deep-seated anger and pain that I've held back for years, different gods and deities, spirituality, but more recently, from fall of last year up until publishing this book, I discovered a power metal band called Powerwolf. I love how grandiose they are, if you ever listen to their music. And I kind of wanted to capture that in my book, especially when it comes to the voices of the gods. If you guys are interested, I recommend the songs Glaubenskraft, Bisa Jevudon, and My Will Be Done. I will leave links in the description below to those songs, because they really inspired me. And like I said earlier, that was the voice I wanted to go with for the gods in my book, especially when it comes to Glaubenskraft, My Will Be Done, and Bisa Jevudon. Okay, and now we're getting into big emotional and philosophical themes. Thank God for this outline. Yeah, so now we're on the big topics of nihilism and existentialism. I would say my book is heavy on the nihilism, or more so the destruction that nihilism brings. And many people dismiss nihilism and would get upset and angry if you were to say life is meaningless. I think getting upset about that in particular is a cop-out. It's a cop-out that prevents you from diving deeper into the void, into the darkness, and discovering who you truly are. Nihilism, I think, is destructive because it strips you bare. It strips you of everything and forces you to ask yourself, who are you? Even like when everything is taken away from you and you're left with nothing, what do you do? And nihilism, it looks at that. It looks at you when you're stripped bare and says, what do you do now? Who are you now? And the thing is, it doesn't judge you. Like, it just wants to see who you really are when you're stripped bare. And that's not a bad thing. And as harsh as it sounds, you are nothing. We are nothing. But here's the thing. Nothing is not a bad thing. Nothing is just emptiness. Now this is where existentialism comes in. Existentialism is, yes, life is meaningless, but you decide what gives your life meaning. What are you going to do to fill the emptiness? I don't see nihilism and existentialism as bad things or bad philosophies. But then again, I practiced both nihilism and existentialism to truly understand what it meant and felt like. Destruction, I realize, isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's necessary, especially if your foundations are faulty. In the end, like, I don't find nihilism or existentialism scary. Maybe in the beginning, like the existential dread, that doesn't feel great. Maybe in the beginning, but you don't need to be scared of nihilism or existentialism. You don't need to be scared of the idea of life potentially being meaningless. There's nothing to be scared of except, well, maybe yourself. As for the emotional themes, anger, rage, resentment lies at the heart of it all. It lies at the heart of this book. I want to say that this book was cathartic because I released all the anger and resentment that I was holding back ever since I was a child up until now. But I feel like I'm still processing it all. It comes back every now and then, but I think that's just how it is when you've been hurt, wrong, mistreated, and dismissed. I'm not an angry person, but I can be, which is pretty obvious with my book. But like I said before, I was never taught how to properly manage my anger in a healthy and mature way. It's something that I had to learn, and it's something that I'm still learning. Writing poetry is nice because it helps me get out what I'm having trouble saying. The fact that some of these poems read like hexes, curses, and spells helps a lot with that release. The poem PMDD, a Maleficium, is exactly that. Maleficium actually means an evil or harmful act that could be related to magic or sorcery. Now that I think about it, there is a line in that poem that goes, "Yes, I wish this on my enemies. I wish this on you." Yeah, so pretty straightforward there. When I was preparing to do this podcast, I came across a question asking, "Who is your book for?" And I wasn't sure, but I thought about it more. And I guess my book is for those who are angry and still feel resentment and hatred at being wronged, at feeling hurt and betrayed. It's for people who don't want to forgive and could be struggling to process their pain. It's for people who say, "I don't want an apology, I want revenge. I want them to hurt and suffer in the way I had to," which is 100% valid. I feel that to my very core. It's part of the reason why I wrote these poems in the way that I did. Trust me, I'm well aware this book isn't for everyone. Some people will feel offended, judged, criticized, and called out. And to those people, I just want to say, if you have hurt someone deeply, abused, traumatized, betrayed, and harmed them in any way, crushed their spirit and broke them, they have probably felt that for years and couldn't do anything about it. They probably carried that pain every day, and once again, they couldn't do anything. You though, you can stand to feel uncomfortable for 2 to 3 minutes. It's the very, very, very least you can do. And if you just don't like how I write poetry and that I butcher poetry, yeah, that's okay. That is totally understandable. It's just I kind of learned poetry it's not just words on paper. It's feelings. There's so much more to it. So much more to poetry. Like, I just thought like it was a simple free verse, sonnet, so on and so forth. But I kind of learned when I was going for my MFA that poetry is so much more. And I would invite you guys to try and expand and look beyond what you were probably taught in school. So right now, I'm going to be reading 2 poems that focus on more so the emotional themes, but also maybe on divine retribution. All right, so the first one is called Just Be Happy. Just be happy, you say, sitting on your marbled throne. Let them eat cake, you have had your fill. Just be happy, you say to the survivors. Just be happy to those wrecked by trauma. How happy you are to inflict as much, scowling when they can no longer hide their pain. Their breakdowns you mock, their tears you dismiss, hurling anger and insults. Just be happy. Loneliness is your sentence. Silent shall the world be to your pain. Comfort and assurance you will have none. Friends and lovers, how unworthy. Crying in your bed, broken and overwhelmed. No one to hold you, to dry your tears. I will look down and say, just be happy. All right, so a particularly brutal poem, but just be happy was what someone said to me a long time ago when I was going through a difficult time. Like, just be happy. It always stuck with me, but people say stuff like that when someone is struggling. I've also heard others say, well, people have it worse than you. Like, it's like people are out here trying to have a pain Olympics to determine whose pain is more valid. Is it really that hard, you guys, to validate someone's pain? Honestly, if someone just validated mine all those years ago, I probably wouldn't have written a poetry book about raining hellfire on the people who fucked me over. But my point is, we're all going through something. We all have our own battles to fight. And some people are struggling. Hell, some people are even losing. Life is unfair, and people, genuinely good people, probably even you or someone you know, unfortunately get the short end of the stick no matter what they or you try to do. I've met people in those situations, and hell, even I've been in situations like that. And it is frustrating and sad. Honestly, the last thing we need is some asshole trying to hand out gold medals in suffering. And so what I'm hoping to get listeners to feel with this particular poem is, if you're saying stuff like just be happy, people have it worse than you, and worst of all, just get over it, do not be surprised when people decide to abandon you. Don't be surprised when people are cold to you and show you no compassion. If you cannot show compassion and understanding towards others, you clearly don't deserve that in return. Like, what makes you deserving of compassion and empathy when you don't show it or have it towards others? If you don't treat people the same way. All right, so the next poem I'm going to share with you guys is one called All Quiet on a Home Front. This sword I lay down, this shield I lay down, this gun I unload, not a single punch will be thrown, nor a bullet fired. Strong no more, resilient no longer, this battlefield isn't worth the anguish, nor is it worth my tears and blood. Fight your battles, fight your wars, for your burdens are not mine to carry. Leave me alone, for I'm going home. To be strong, to be resilient, are compliments unwarranted. So, All Quiet on a Home Front, a gentle nod to All Quiet on the Western Front. This is a poem about choosing your battles and deciding what is worth fighting for. I wrote this when I felt like I was being constantly met with challenges and obstacles. And this is where I kind of dive into paganism, so buckle up. And before I get into it, paganism and how pagans worship and connect with their gods is very different. It's direct and personal. There's no third party like going through a priest. So one of the goddesses that I work with and worship is the Morrigan. She is a war goddess, and to make things short, she values strength, warrior sovereignty, fate, prophecy, and authenticity. There's more, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into it. Maybe in another episode, I'll talk more about the Morrigan and paganism in my life. But yeah, maybe for another episode. Let me know if you guys are interested. But anyway, yeah, I was going through a tough time. And I felt like I was constantly being met with obstacles. I remember feeling or being fed up and saying, I'm done. I refuse to fight and be strong. I refuse to be strong and resilient just because I can take it, just because I was expected to be that way. I'm not a warrior and I don't want to be. I deserve to be treated with compassion, kindness, and tenderness. And I wrote all that down. I wrote all that down, read it out loud, and burned my intentions before releasing the ashes into nature, just to make it all final. And yeah, that is simple witchcraft there. You can do that, just be careful with fire. Don't burn your house down, and make sure you have water nearby. And I actually thought by doing this, the Morrigan would leave me alone and not want me. I thought she would see me as weak and unworthy, which was what a part of me wanted. But the Morrigan, or Neiman in particular, in their great wisdom visited me while I was meditating. She was like, okay, if you want to be treated with softness and kindness, you have to treat yourself with softness and kindness first. Don't look for challenges when you want to rest. Don't look for obstacles when you don't want to do them. Don't say yes when you want to say no. So, yeah, the opposite happened. What I declared, wasn't weakness. It was sovereignty, personal sovereignty, which is 100% Morrigan coded. So when it comes to this poem, what I hope listeners will feel or get from it is, I want you guys to know that your worth and value should not be based on how much you had to suffer and endure. What you probably went through was likely unfair. The strongest people in the world still deserve love, kindness, compassion, and tenderness because you have no idea what they could be going through. Don't automatically assume someone can deal with something on their own just because they're strong, just because you expect them to be. At the same time, you don't have to fight every single battle that comes your way. Not everything is worth fighting for. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to go home and take care of yourself. All right, so my closing thoughts to close episode 1. So when it comes to these two poems, the ones that I've read just now, it goes back to the idea of us needing to have more empathy, understanding, and compassion. Like, I'm not gonna lie, you guys. I'm really disgusted by the lack of compassion and empathy in the world today. Like, we even have morons going around calling empathy and compassion a sin. They call it the, quote, sin of empathy. Where the hell did they get that? Like, if you are calling empathy and compassion a sin, well, I baptize you in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Foot up your ass. Yeah, I would say a majority of these poems are pretty heavy. Like the foot I'm going to induct in some of y'all's asses. And for part 2, we're going to dive deeper into these poems. I have some in mind, but if you have my book already, you can make recommendations in the comments below. Which poem would you like me to talk about? My book is also available to purchase from Lulu. I'll leave a link in the description below to that as well. Anyway, that is all I have for you guys today or tonight. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later.